All right, so behind us, the citizens of Kitchener are marching and chanting, and it's beautiful. And before us, we have Brian Otto, a great dude. Brian, do you consent to being on Canadian Love?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. That was very formal. I appreciate that. So, Brian, tell us what brings you to this event today.
I would like to be part of the resistance to the Conservatives' agenda.
Resistance to the agenda.
Yes.
Okay, I like that. Brian is also an actor, so it shows. He says things that are very dramatic. Brian, tell me about this resistance and this agenda.
Well, there's a limited amount we can do. They are the officially elected majority-minority government.
Electoral reform, get into it.
Oh, absolutely. 58% of people turned out to vote in the last election. 40% of them voted for this government.
Yeah.
So that works out to be about roughly a quarter of the voters of Ontario elected this government.
Ontario, how did we let this happen?
Apathy?
Apathy, yeah. Definitely getting out and voting, I think, is something, I really want to prioritize the message that everyone should get out and vote.
Absolutely. It would be a lot more effective if we had a system that more closely represented the voting results. There are three, actual substantial parties, along with, four if you count the Greens. Only two parties really ever have a chance of getting elected, with rare exceptions. We did have an NDP government briefly, which, by the way, has been historically trashed unjustly.
Who has been trashing it?
Just about everyone.
Okay.
The media, the politicians since. Bob Rae's government, the NDP government, had the best fiscal record in the nation at the time of very, very difficult economic times. In fact, NDP governments across the country have the best overall record of fiscal management of the three major parties, historically.
Really? Because I have been told that, and I mean, I've been told many things. On this thing. I've been talking to many people about politics, and they all have very different views. But I have been told that people feel that people on the left. Well, I was told by a centrist yesterday that people on the left are more morally responsible, but people on the right, the Conservatives, are better with money. It sounds like you're saying that might not be the case.
It is not the case. Stats Canada can show you, if you do a quick research online, check for the fiscal results of governments by party across the country. Historically, now it may be a little different right now. Rachel Notley in Alberta had an extremely difficult situation to deal with. She's in a province that depends largely on a dying industry.
Right. And I mean, definitely, it's very much the situation as well. It's very much the global economy, the national economy, and the provincial economy that influence how well they can do. So it's relative.
They're all interlinked as well.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I just discovered this just the other day. The federal Liberals had predicted something like a 14, I don't know the number, don't quote me on that, a significant deficit for this looming end of budget year. It turns out they're going to have a large surplus, largely a result of increased tax revenues.
Wow. Okay. So the Liberals have increased tax and made the government richer.
I don't know that they increased tax. I'd have to look into it deeper. I know that the federal government has received more tax revenue than they projected. The reasons for that I can't explain right now.
Interesting. This would be something very interesting to look into.
Absolutely.
I mean, the cynic in me wants to say, oh, maybe they got it from SNC-Lavalin, but but that's partisan and inappropriate.
Sure, they made a lot of illegal and inappropriate donations, but the scale is not enough to affect the national deficit.
Yeah. Here's the thing about taxes that I think I sometimes forget is that, corporate donations, and you think, oh, well, we need corporate support, we need corporations in our democratic process, but the amount that any corporation can give compared to the taxes of real human Canadians is negligent. Canadians on their own, negligible. Thank you, negligible. Yes, that's correct. The amount of contribution that our taxes give to the government is so much bigger than corporations. We are so much more important.
It is now. Historically, if you go back into the 50s and 60s, the portion of tax revenue provided by corporations was 3 or 4 times its portion of the current tax revenue. corporate tax cuts, one after another through decades, has shifted the load from corporations onto individuals. I remember reading John Ralston Saul saying when the GST first came in years ago, there's a lot of money lost in collecting a sales tax like that through administration. I can't remember the exact quote, but the sense of it was, it makes a far more sense to tax where the money is.
Wow. Taxes go where the money is, corporations. Would you say you support higher corporate tax?
Absolutely. There have been tax cuts federally, provincially, across the country. And look at the United States, tax cuts. They keep ballooning their deficit as a result. The theory, dating all the way back to Ronald Reagan and possibly farther back than that, is that cutting corporate taxes will lead to increased economic stimulus, more people, more jobs.
Right. Those really rich Wall Street types will be happier, and then they'll make more jobs for us.
That's the theory. The theory has been disproven every single time. It never happens. They don't make more jobs. They just pay it out to their executives and their shareholders.
Wow. So unless you're a shareholder, whether you morally believe in the right or the left, unless you're a shareholder, you're protecting your own finances more if you vote left. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
I guess so. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, because otherwise you're just helping lower corporate taxes, and that doesn't help any of us.
No, despite the claim that it will. Trickle-down has been demonstrated to be a fraud.
Wow.
Repeatedly.
Wow. You heard it here, guys. Trickle-down economics, not true.
The theory, there's a great meme I've seen on Facebook. The theory is, picture one of those pyramids of wine glasses.
Yes.
Where you pour wine into the top, and once that glass is full, it spills over onto the ones below, and then further down. And that's the theory of trickle-down economics. The actuality is that the more you pour into the wine glass at the top, the bigger it gets.
Ah, wow.
The glass grows. It doesn't trickle down.
Right. Yeah. The amount that it trickles is much less because the glass just continues absorbing more wine.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that. So let's get back to the NDP. You're saying that the NDP was when they were in front of Canada, they actually managed things fairly well fiscally. How did they do that? What did they do that was so good?
I don't know. First of all, they've never formed a federal government. Okay. But they have
Ontario.
They have formed provincial governments in BC, in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, in Ontario once. And with those as a record, they have the best record of running budget, either balanced budgets or surplus in their budgets, better than the Liberals or the Conservatives, federally or provincially.
Yeah. Wow.
How they do it? Probably good management. I don't really know.
Huh. Well, I wonder if part of it is a focus on...
I'm not an economist.
Yeah. No, sorry. I'm putting a lot of questions.
Or a politician.
Hey, yeah, that's fair. I would never insult you, so... No, I'm joking. We love politicians. We hope to get them on the show. If you're watching and you're a politician, let us interview you.
Like them or not, you need them. You know?
Oh, well, it's true, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah, one thing that has occurred to me recently, this is just a brief aside, we can cut it out in the main interview, but like, I've realized that, you know, people talk about politicians running the country. They don't. Bureaucrats run the country.
Bingo.
Politicians help make decisions on what the bureaucrats should do to run the country, but it's the bureaucrats that run the country. Politicians just theoretically should just be there to say, hey, the people want you to do this, please. Like, that's sort of their role. I don't know. Higher management, but they're not running things. They're just making decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want a local example?
Sure.
I shot a series of advertising shots for the City of Waterloo's bylaw department some years ago.
Yeah.
We had 5 episodes. They wanted to do an educational series using comedy as a teaching about, you know, trash disposal and picking up after your pet and various other kinds of municipal bylaws.
Yeah.
We finished them, submitted them to the bylaw department. The bylaw people loved them. The licensing people loved them. Everybody loved them until they kicked them upstairs to the politicians. And they said, no, we can't use these. They're too edgy.
Ooh, too edgy. Why were the politicians afraid of edginess? That's super in right now.
You would have to ask them.
Wow.
And this was several years ago, so that some of those people may not even be in. And you probably shouldn't put this in the final, because...
Little intrigue on local Waterloo. It's all right. We didn't say which politicians.
You know,
And honestly, like, I think something that I've seen in politics is that people are so worried about image and pleasing their sort of following that they might be less inclined to take risks, which I think is a negative thing because
Maybe.
otherwise, how do you like what did
The bylaw officers themselves.
yeah.
The quote, the feedback we had when they were watching these little clips that we had, then they were 5 or 6 minutes apiece.
Yeah.
They said, our producer called to see where they were coming with their review, and they said, well, we haven't finished going through them yet because we have to keep stopping and rewinding because we're laughing so hard.
That's amazing. So they were really, really real, and the bylaw people were super, super into it.
Absolutely.
But the politician side.
Whether it was management or top-level bureaucrats or politicians, I don't know. But somebody made the decision that they couldn't use them.
That's fair. That's unfortunate. All right. Well, I mean, I get that, and I'm hoping that if the youth and people everywhere start getting more involved in politics and less apathetic, then that might change that. Politicians might start going, wow, edgy is in, we want to catch people's attention, we want to include humans, let's make things that work for them. I don't know.
I think the way to engage younger voters is to put more progressive policies on the table.
Wow.
We in the baby boomer generation are, sort of fading away over the next decade or two.
Goodbye, Canada.
The people coming up are looking for it. I mean, they have a different experience of life than, I grew up in the 50s and 60s. Things were far different, far more hopeful for us. Young people, what they term millennials.
Yes.
My daughter being among them.
Daughter and other
Have a much different economic and political landscape to deal with than we did. Far less hopeful.
Interesting. I wonder if there's a way to bring that hope back, but in a more knowledgeable and savvy way because they've already seen so much and have the internet, which really informs people.
Oh, yeah, well, it informs and misinforms both ways.
Touche. Yeah.
Particularly social media.
That's fair. I mean, this is a YouTube series, so I don't know what to tell you.
Well, you can find almost any position you want to support or find out more about. You can find it on Facebook or YouTube or I guess there's this thing called the dark web as well, which I have no access to, unfortunately. But
now that would be an interesting showpiece. No, I mean that's the reason why we're trying to do this is to try to help all of these viewpoints that disagree with each other start to understand each other and be able to have a positive dialogue instead of always yelling over Facebook comments.
I don't particularly want to be referring back to the United States situation because ours is different. But in terms of getting progressives and young people out to participate in the voting process, in the electoral process, Bernie Sanders in his last run for president was drawing crowds that were double what Trump or Hillary Clinton were drawing, and they were largely composed of young people.
Yeah.
When the nomination went to Hillary Clinton, most of those people did not come out to vote. Or they voted for Trump, sort of in protest. A bad idea, in my opinion, but...
Great job, guys. Great job.
Yeah.
Look what happened.
Glad you went that way. Oh, yeah, look around. Yeah.
No, yeah, fair enough. And I get that they were feeling disenfranchised. They were feeling that their views weren't being taken seriously and that the nominations went to someone they didn't support. Mm-hmm. I don't think not voting or voting for the other side that they had disagreed with initially is ever the right tactic. But, I mean, I definitely understand where they're coming from.
Voting is an imperfect system. I think it was Winston Churchill who said something to the effect that, yeah, democracy is a terrible system of government. It's just better than all the others.
Fair. We can make it better, though. Electoral reform, is no matter what side you're on, electoral reform is probably a good idea.
It is.
Unless you just want to have two parties. Like, unless your politics is, I really like only having two parties.
Yeah, either or.
Yeah.
Not always the best situation.
Yeah.
Because the world doesn't work in black and white, yes or no, all the time.
Exactly.
So,
all right, Brian, we've taken up some of your time here. I really appreciate you. Thank you very much for being on Canadian
shivering.
Live. Internally, I am just dying, but I'm a little chilly.
Thanks very much, Toga Man.
Thank you, Brian. All right, guys, thank you.